loved about that scene of her jumping out of the car and going into the building was mostly, the stuff, again, you and I talked about this last time, and even in Contact, everything is kind of like very, smooth, dolly in, pull back. But
Right.
that was all handheld, at least from the hallway, like when the camera, when you're following her. And was that something that Zemeckis wanted, or was it like, is there a story behind that, or was it just kind of right off the bat, okay, this is how we're gonna do it because we have to be immersed into her character as an audience member.
Right. So the idea was to connect us with the character. The difficult part of it was we shot the movie in 35 millimeter anamorphic, about half of it, and about half of it in 65 millimeter. And a lot of that had to do with all the visual effect shots that are in the film. And so to keep the quality, the image quality of visual effects work back in that era, to keep it 100% from any kind of reduction of quality through image manipulation, we were working with as big a negative as we could to as it goes down the line, keep that quality. So there was a head that had been developed to stabilize cameras for kind of sports and action, and it's called the Lieber head, Nick Phillips Lieber head. And so I took that head and I mounted it on the end of the crane arm, which was attached to the insert car, which was towing her car for all of those sequences, because Bob wanted these dramatic moves to push in on the subject into Jodie Foster. But we also had to stabilize it because we're on a dirt road towing the car out at the real location. So the stabilization was fairly new at that time for that specific purpose, and to use it in more in a production camera situation. So it allowed us to build up the energy, to really feel like the character's driving the car, really heading down the dirt roads, which we were. But the difference was that we had it mounted on a crane arm, so we could continually make these dramatic moves up high, booming down on her, pushing in on her as she's making these commands, racing against the clock, in essence, to get a lock on this signal before they lost it. The Earth rotated too much. So that was kind of the idea that Bob was getting at, and that's ultimately what we came up with to execute, in essence, the concept. And so when she comes out of the car, it's actually a steady cam that follows her into the building. And then the match move was a yet another steady cam move that chases her up the stairs and into the actual office where all those computers were.
Right. I find it amazing that it's been what, 26 years almost, and you still remember so many details. That's that's amazing.
Well, there are no easy shots in a Bob Zemeckis movie. There's never just put it on the tripod and frame it up and go.
Yeah.
And so every shot is discussed, and there's a reason for it, and it takes an army of us to execute these ideas. But that's the exciting part. That's, for me, that's what I love. To me, Bob isn't a big fan of the actual shooting part of the movie, because to him there's a lot of compromise in it. But to me, it's game day. It's like, we got to pull the shot off. We got to make this happen to the best of our abilities, and it gets exciting, especially when you pull these shots off and they're working. And in that film, there's a lot of shots like that, and some of them are so silky smooth and so slow you don't realize what's going on behind the camera to actually execute this one shot of 3 minutes of movie making.
And that's what I love about your work, right? It's just it's not like a gimmick. It's so natural and you don't pick up on it. I mean, whenever I see your work, even as a filmmaker, I'll notice it, but it's just immerses me in so much that I forget about it. And that's the great thing. And it also obviously has to do with direction and performances, but still the way the camera moves and the way the audience is immersed in it, I still find it, fascinating. And I found something similar of what you did in Contact. I'm sure it's there in a lot of films, but to me, I picked up a lot of similarities in The Witches, which you did recently with Robert Zemeckis.
Right.
The way the shot design and all that. Going back to Contact, the sequence of the when the bomb goes off, right?
Right.
And this is obviously special effects. Even they were in the early stages after Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump.
Mhm.
Special effects are great, but how do you work with a shot with a um shot scene like that, even though it's a wide frame, to kind of make sure that timing of the effects and what's happening? Are you working with the like visual effects team on the spot, just with some mock-up, or what's the process of that like, if anything?
Well, the discussions usually get to storyboard form at some point so that
Mm.
everybody knows what the shots are and how they're going to tie together in essence. And so if there's a big visual effect shot like there was in those films, there probably were some mechanical effects that happened at the same time,
Okay.
right? To help the interacting light of the situation. So the machine itself had this sense of light coming from below and hitting the subjects that were up on the gantry.
Yeah.
So we had to create what felt like a big arm going across a light source. So the way we did that is I used very small globes, like MR16 size globes, but a mass amount of them, because the smaller the globe, the faster it reacts. Like if you take a big globe and you want to dim it and bring it back in, it's going to happen slowly. And so, but we needed an interactive light because we didn't have anything big enough to kind of cover the light. There was no set big enough to actually do what really happened. So we designed these lights that we could create the fade in the light, so the light would travel like Las Vegas, as
Yeah.
right? So how light travels. So we made this light that traveled that created that flow of the actual armature going across in the actual machine that's built, and the light source coming from below. So you try to recreate all these light sources that are discussed in the script, and then illustrated perhaps in storyboards, and then when we put the subjects in there, how much of that set are we actually going to build? How's the light source going to interact with the machine? What's
Mm.
the timing of that? How fast are those things really going at this point? So you have to figure all that out to create this interactive light with the actors on the set the day you shoot it. So you're always trying to, in essence, create this illusion, but you have to do it in pieces sometimes where it really gets pretty complicated. But and especially in that era when we did this 26 years ago, as you were saying, it was a lot tougher than it is today.
Oh yeah.
Um, just because there was a lot more mechanical effect going on at the same time, and the timing of the camera and the lighting interacting to make the subject feel like they're really in that space.
And you mentioned timing, right? Which is what I feel like when you're doing a scene like that, is there a lot of different time, even though it's storyboarded, everything is planned, but
Mhm.
sometimes things don't go as planned. That's just nature of life. And
Right.
was there a certain point in that scene where you guys decided to do multiple time versions of it? Like if it's like 20 seconds versus 40 seconds, or was it just something that you guys figured out that this is how it's going to be and that's it?
Well, I think we always go in with our best foot forward in timing. Um, but you do need to adapt on the day when you're shooting. And a lot of it comes from the gut, the feeling of it, what you're seeing. And Bob has the ability to somehow keep the whole movie in his head while we're making the movie. So, you know, if I'm not feeling it, I'll bring it up and say, "Gosh, Bob, I think this is too slow or too fast or
Yeah.
whatever it may be," and he'll look at it, and then he'll either agree with you or say, "No, no, this is it. This is the way it should be." Like in What Lies Beneath, I felt everything we were doing was too slow. All the, and he was spot on in that situation. But I think that's something that on the day when you're shooting, you're always working on that. You're always, especially when you have nowhere to go. Like you can't change the pace in the editing room,
Yeah.
right? That's where it gets really difficult, and you really have to have it thought through the best you can, and then go with your gut at the end of the day.